Well, joining me in the studio now, Times columnist Hugo Rivkin. Good to see you, Hugo. And I'm joined by writer and journalist Nels Abbey, and also by Scarlett Maguire, Pollster at Jail Partners. So why don't I start with you as you're here, Hugo? And this is a pretty unsavoury state of affairs, isn't it? I've got the actual comments that The Guardian says that Frank Hester made. He says he's talking about somebody that he really detests, a woman that he's presumably worked with, and he says it's like trying not to be racist, but you see Diane Abbott on the TV and you're just like, you just want to hate all black women because she's there. And I don't hate all black women at all, but I think that she should be shot. That's what The Guardian says he says. If he did say that, do you think it behoves the Conservatives to give back the £10 million?
Of course. Two things are very obvious here. Firstly, the comments are as bad as it gets. Of course they were racist. He also said she should be killed. This is not small. This is huge. The other thing is the amount of money isn't small either. So the Conservatives are in real difficulty if they try and swallow this and accept it and say there's no problem here, because obviously there's a problem. They're also in real difficulty if they have to give back the money. They can't really afford to give back the money. It's so much money. It's 10 million quid.
Yeah.
They've got an election coming up. So
yes.
this is a real...
Although Michael Crick was here in the first hour of the programme and he said the opposite thing. He said the Tories have got lots of money.
Right.
To them, £10 million is something they can easily afford.
Well,
and it was suggested by both my guests in the first hour of this programme that an idea would be a kind of compromise idea, if you believe in such things, would be to ring-fence that £10 million and for the Tories to use it for some kind of, racial harmony movement.
Ultimately, they have to give the money back.
They have to give it back. Why do you think so?
I don't see how they can go into an election admitting that election is funded by a man who said these words.
Do you have to like and morally approve of your donors?
Well, I think your voters have to like and morally approve of your donors, or else you're in trouble. I mean, it'll be thrown in their face, and rightly, throughout the election campaign.
Really, do you really think the voters, the electorate, are that interested in where the money came from?
He said she should be shot. He was as racist as you get, and he said she should be shot. I mean, you can any Conservative MP who appears on television between now and the election will have to defend that and should have to defend that.
Let me bring Nels Abbey into the discussion. Nels, thank you for joining us. Good afternoon to you. Let me just give you Diane Abbott's own statement here. She says, it is frightening. I live in Hackney. I don't drive, so I find myself at weekends popping on a bus or even walking places more than most MPs. I'm a single woman and that makes me vulnerable anyway. But to hear someone talking like this is worrying. For all of my career as an MP, I've thought it important not to live in a bubble, but to mix and mingle with ordinary people. The fact that 2 MPs have been murdered in recent years makes talk like this all the more alarming. I'm currently not a member of the Parliamentary Labour Party, but remain a member of the Labour Party itself. So I'm hoping for public support from Keir Starmer. What's your take on the whole story? And do you think it's absolutely vital that the Tories return the money?
I think, of course, as a gentleman in the studio pointed out, of course, it's clearly racist of the most serious order. I think he should return the money. But you want to know something else? I don't really care, because I think that something deeper is going on over here right now. I think his house should be raided. I think he should be arrested. He should be searched. He should be thrown in a cell. He should be charged. He should be prosecuted, and he should be left potentially fighting some form of depression for the foreseeable future. Because you want to know why I think that?
But wait, Nels, you know you can't just raid a house, arrest people and throw them in a cell without a suitable charge. What is the charge here? What would you charge him with?
Well, I know a young man. I spent 3 days in court over the last couple of weeks, 2 weeks ago, for a young man who was charged for with under hate crime laws and the Malicious Communications Act, the crimes against malicious communications. So, for sending an emoji to a potential Tory PPC. Now, that is the rate to which the standard of the height or level of potential criminality, if we look at in this country, it is nowhere near as serious as calling for the shooting of an MP. Sending somebody a Daffy Duck emoji or so is nowhere near as serious as calling for the shooting of somebody. Yeah, this young man his life was completely ruined. He was acquitted by the jury. So I think what we see here is the tip of the iceberg in terms of racism in Britain today. That yes, what he said was racist, was clearly racist, was violently racist. But if I point out, if he was an economically challenged person or a black person or an economically challenged black person, so he would already be in a cell. There is no doubt about it whatsoever. And he would be in a cell for taking anti-racist positions, let alone racist ones.
Let's bring Scarlett Maguire into this. Scarlett, as you probably know if you watch this programme regularly, is a pollster at JL Partners. So what she's here for is really to take the temperature and reflect what people are thinking and feeling about this. I've had two guests, one after the other, Scarlett, say there's absolutely no doubt whatsoever the Tories should give back the money. Nels says it's so appalling, abominable, you wouldn't want to be tainted with such money. Hugo says if they don't, they'll be forever upbraided and catcalled for keeping it throughout their election campaign and process. I wonder what you think and what your polls show.
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't think it's actually been polled quite yet. We are at the moment currently asking about it actually for some snap results that will be ready tomorrow morning to try and take the temperature a bit. I mean, my idea will be that those results will probably come back with people sort of deciding pretty overwhelmingly that it is indeed racist. I mean, the comments were completely shocking. I almost spat my tea out when I was listening to the radio this morning. And it's sort of incredible that the party have got themselves into sort of yet another mess over this, and it's the last thing they need.
And the idea of returning the money, the idea that donations to political parties must come from the saintly, the beatifically blessed, those who are paragons of all virtues, and if they're not, you must not take their money. What about that idea?
I think that's a really, really interesting point. I think the problem with this is, like, you know, scandals or things are even worse if they play into people's preconceptions of a politician or a political party. And I think the problem is, if you were to ask a lot of the public, I think, sort of think of the Conservatives as being potentially funded by some pretty unfavourable things or people. That's just the instincts about the party. You know, it goes back to, I mean, what Theresa May said a few years ago about, you know, not wanting to come across as the nasty party. People still have that sort of suspicion lurking in the back of their mind. So I think anything that plays into that idea is going to be even more damaging for them and even harder to sort of become unstuck. And so I think that's part of the problem that they've landed themselves here. And again, I think it plays into this idea that not just the Conservative Party, actually, that people are feeling pretty anti-politics generally now. And this certainly won't help that.
All right. And Hugo, Frank Hester says this was just a rude comment about Ms Abbott. He says his comments had nothing to do with her gender nor the colour of her skin. I'll just repeat them so that we can see whether we agree with that or not. It's like trying not to be racist, but you see Diane Abbott on the TV and you're just like, you just want to hate all black women because she's there. And I don't hate all black women at all, but I think she should be shot. I
mean, if racism means anything, that's racist. You know, I mean, look, Diane Abbott is quite annoying, and often says things that don't seem too smart. But look at Lee Anderson, you know, and people don't have to feel the need to attack Lee Anderson on the basis of all middle-aged white men. You know, I mean, the fact that he makes the link between Diane Abbott and all black women, of course, that's racist. That's literally what racism means.
Well, he says it's not about the colour of her skin. That's exactly what he's talking about.
He seems to have noticed it while speaking.
Exactly. I mean, he's not talking about her clothes. He's not talking about, you know, what she read at Oxford or Cambridge. He's talking about the colour of her. That's exactly what he's talking about.
This was in a meeting.
Yeah.
This wasn't like he was drunk in a pub chatting with a friend, which wouldn't have been acceptable either.
No.
This was in a meeting. This was to his staff.
But tell me about the kind of moral issue vis-a-vis returning money from people you don't approve of or whose views you don't like, who've done something wrong in the past or whatever it is. Do you remember that furore about that party at the President's Club? And I think the allegation was that, you know, women were being treated in a sexist kind of way. In other words, they were being treated as kind of sexual playthings with no respect and everything else. And the whole thing was to raise money, do you remember, for Great Ormond Street Hospital, which people always think of, and quite rightly so, as one of the most deserving charitable causes in the country. It's for sick children. What else would anyone want to give money for? Of course, that. And there was an absolute flap over the whole thing about whether the money should be given back from this tainted evening of disrespect towards women who were not fallen women but were treated as if they were. It was like a sort of scene from La Traviata or something. Nobody knew what the hell was going on except the people who were there and they weren't telling. But should Great Ormond Street have to give back the money? And I can't remember now whether they did or didn't. I think they didn't in the end.
I think they didn't. I think that's a bit different.
Why is that different?
Well, firstly, there's a swathe of undesirability, right? And some people may be a bit in it, some people may be a lot in it. These comments are just so far in it. There's no defence for them. They're right on the other side. But also, you're giving money to a charity. A lot of people might argue that if people are undesirable, if people are nasty, if people are malign, taking money off them and giving it to a children's hospital is one of the best things you can do.
Right.
You know, that I don't think you can quite make that argument with the Conservative Party.
You can't.
He's given money to the Conservative Party because he wants the Conservative Party to win, and the Conservative Party wanted to accept it. I mean, again, I just don't see how they go forward not giving the money back. Throughout the election, Every time there's a poster unveiled, the first question any journalist will ask will be, did the racist guy pay for that?
Yeah.
That's it, again and again.
OK, let me ask you this, Nels, then. Is it possible for the Tories to continue and to keep their mitts on the money? What will happen if they do? Is it absolutely vital that they give it back? Because certainly they don't seem to have done so far today. They don't seem in any hurry to take it out of the coffers and give him a cheque, do they?
I think things have changed within the last few moments. So Kemi Badenoch, who nobody would consider to be an anti-racist, has come out and labelled the comments racist. And Kemi Badenoch is a very shrewd politician. She knows what she's doing. So in her actually making this statement, making it clear, she's clearly somebody who could potentially be the next leader of the party. She's pretty much breathing down Sunak's neck in terms of leadership potentially right now. It could actually, I don't know, lead to some winds of change blowing. And therefore, I think it could become untenable to potentially keep the money. Because
just checking, what did you say about Kemi Badenoch? Did you say no one could consider her to be an anti-racist? That's not what you meant, is it?
Of course, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Go out to hop in the street and speak to any black person and ask them if they consider Kemi Badenoch to be anti-racist, and you'll get. In fact, let's get JL partners on the case. Ask black people what they think, and they'll tell you Kemi Badenoch is no anti-racist by any means whatsoever.
But we've got a couple of negatives here. A double negative. We know what a double negative is. A double negative means a positive. So if you say she's not anti-racist, you're effectively saying Kemi Badenoch is racist. We all speak English. We know what that means. Two no's mean a yes. So is that what you're trying not to say but actually saying? Are you calling her racist?
Kemi Badenoch does not take positions against racism. And I think I may have just done it again. But to be very, very clear, yes. I am saying that Kemi Badenoch is not somebody who has a problem or takes positions against racism. No, she's not. That is her brand. That's her. Kemi's been in that business of pandering to pretty much to racism for a very, very long time. It's made her a star of the party. It's worked for her. And I can't really fault her or so with that regard. That's her. She has to live.
So hang on. If you don't take a position against racism, which is illegal, which is illegal in this country. You're not allowed to be racist or show racism or incite people to racism. If you don't take a position against racism, if you don't oppose it and stand up and be counted and say that's racist, I deplore it, it's dreadful, you can't say that, you mustn't, whatever it is, then you're condoning it or you're passively observing it? Or what are you doing if you don't take a position against racism? What are you doing then?
That's Kemi's vessel. That's what Kemi has pretty much largely, that's the perspective, that is the perception within the community that Kemi's vessel has been pandering to racism pretty much. Kemi is not some super talented politician. She's a shrewd politician on matters of race and anti-wokeness and all these other bits and bobs. So that's what Kemi does. That's her thing. It's not, I'm really surprised this is a controversial statement because it's widely known. It's not really, there's hardly any arguments here whatsoever.
Well, let me bring Hugo in and just see whether he will confirm that, whether he feels the same way about her, because obviously she has now spoken out about this and she's done exactly what Nels has said she wouldn't do, which is she said this is racist and I deplore it. And, you know, that is taking a position against it and saying it's racist, isn't it?
In this case, it's taking a position. Kemi Badenoch talks about race very differently from almost any other public figure. She's always made a point of being that because of her background, because of her Nigerian heritage, she does not consider herself to be a minority. She always says, I come from a place where people like me are the majority. That's how I identify. Mm-hmm. So she's always talked a lot in a way that is very different from how the normal sort of narrative of race relations in Britain goes. Whether this is offensive to some people or celebrated by some people, I simply couldn't say that. That's not my experience.
Well, let's ask Nels, is it offensive to some people or celebrated by others or what?
Sorry, what specific are you speaking about?
What Hugo just described as a very unusual approach to racism, whereby Kemi Badenoch says, I'm not in any kind of minority, I'm Nigerian, it's a huge country, I come from a place where I'm in the majority, not the minority, and I don't experience racism in the way that many others do. What's your take on that?
Kemi Badenoch's upbringing is verbatim the exact same as mine. We actually grew up in the same area of Lagos. Kemi is in the business of saying what people want to hear, particularly, dare I say, people with power and people who might actually have racist tendencies. That's what Kemi would do. This is nothing controversial. This is a known fact. This is what Kemi's done almost since she became a public figure, even when she was still Kemi Adegoke back in 2011 when I first heard of her. this is what she was doing over at TED Talks in Houston back in the day.
Okay,
So none of this should come as a surprise
question,
to
Nels,
anyone.
then. Sorry to interrupt, but we're
Please.
running out of time. Question for you, then. She has spoken out about this. She has. You have said that that's not what she does and she doesn't do it. She's done it. So what does that lead you to conclude about Frank Hester and this £10 million donation?
It's a gravity-shaking moment, essentially. That it's pretty much an earth-defying moment that Kemi Badenoch has taken a position against racism. While the earth is shaking, it's an earthquake, and I think that it leaves Rishi Sunak in a very, very untenable position. That the Conservative Party are going to have to come out and condemn the racism of Frank Hester and give him back his 10 million. But more importantly, the CPS and the police have to come out and take a position against him. That's what where the real matter is now.
Hugo?
I mean, look, as I said, certainly they have to give the money back. Whether these are comments that he should be investigated over, it was 2019. Here and now, if you stand up in a meeting and say somebody should be shot, you'd expect the police to knock on the door. We'll see whether that happens in this case.
All right, Scarlett, you're going to be looking at the results of the poll tomorrow, but you hear Nels saying Scarlett will confirm, Kemi Badenoch, and then we do the double negative here, does not not stand up against racism.
Well, now I'm quite confused. No, I feel like I'm in sort of agreement with what Hugo is saying on that one. Kemi Badenoch, the views of the public on her, actually a lot of people don't know who she is. We know that she's pretty popular with Conservative members in particular, but yeah, I don't know. It's a funny one. We'll see what the poll says.